In the office doesn't mean what it used to mean. I'm Ryan Noel, and I'm excited to be here with Wil Marquez, a designer, architect, problem solver, and we're going to talk about this and more on this edition of ShoffChats. Let's get into it.
Real walls, finished space, like they just said, okay, we understand the geometry, we understand this.
How are you doing, Wil?
Happy to be back in Indianapolis.
Sweet.
The trip was great.
Yeah.
In fact, I think everybody needs 4 hours to be in quiet.
Yeah, at least.
At least. And I'm doing that trip more often today than I have ever been, maybe, which is good.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I tend to, I get my quiet at the end of the night, like after everybody's in bed, the kids are in bed, and just, yeah.
You're in a woosah?
Sometimes I can stare at a wall. I've been known to stare at a wall.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. So good. Nice being here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm glad you're here. I'm going to take you way back. Maybe to childhood, maybe not that far.
Wow. But
I know you as a person who is looking to address needs and solve problems. And I'm wondering if you have a memory of a time early on that was an indicator of what you'd spend your life doing. Is there an earliest memory of solving a challenge or a problem?
It may seem a little cliche, but so long as we're talking about way long ago, one of the things that I'll bring up is in Northwest Indiana during the 80s, there was a tremendous amount of snow, way more snow than there is today. And snow forts was that was my jam. And I used to lock in on doing some pretty remarkable structures.
Really?
Yeah, in my backyard, in my neighborhood. And so, maybe if this conversation right here is a intro into my biography one day, then for sure we'll need to talk about, the work that I did.
Do you remember any standout features of the snow
large
fort?
Snowballs, large tunnels, large spaces. I think, when you're a child, I see this in my own kids, is that space is you're trying to understand what it is. You're trying to find a box. I even notice with my kids, there's toys all over the place. They're not interested in that. What they are interested in is the Amazon box that's oversized.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this box is awesome. And it's because they're trying to make their own space. They're trying to understand volume. They're trying to see how to feel comfortable. And I'm like, man, why did we just drop all this money on these toys?
Yeah.
It's this box.
That's every parent's plight is like, we could have just got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we just got more snow, there'd be more forts.
That's right.
So,
oh my gosh. So then that sets a really good basis. And then we've known each other for a while now. So let's say going back to early career, 15 years ago, seemingly a lifetime ago, what were the big challenges that you were working through at that time?
I remember opening up with purpose out of my garage, actually. I had a mid-century home, and the inside was something more of a museum, really. And the garage was a place where we had a big table. And there was a developer across the street that had bought basically a sort of washed-up mid-century apartment building. And essentially what started to happen there was, cancer is sort of, death of a slow kind. It takes a really long time to build up, and this was the situation with this apartment building in a way where the residents, in a plea for help, almost started to ruin their own space. They started to damage their own space. They were putting rocks in the sewer lines. They were almost attempting to destroy the infrastructure in a way where the health department would come in, proclaim it as destroyed or uninhabitable. That was their last, nobody was listening to them. And so I'm a neighbor across the street. I'm seeing, big trash bins being filled with trash. No one's picking them up. because the landlord just sort of forgot
Yeah.
to have the service pick up the dumpsters. Mold was, so a lot of people were, a lot of people are like, well, why are these people hanging outside? Why aren't they in their house? And a lot of that had to do with it was inhabitable.
Yeah.
So watching that as a neighbor was painful.
Yeah.
And I think really set the tone for how I was going to help solve that problem as one of my first projects with Gary Hobbs with BWI Development. And, we really delivered a design, not only a design, but a bus stop, a cart corral, so that people that were going to the grocery store there at Devington Plaza would have a place to put their carts. It was a lot of very personal problem solving for a community that I think was imploding, starting with that apartment building.
So, I mean, the evidence of the decaying situation was pretty clear. Did you, in order to address this need, was there an amount of connection that needed to happen with the people that lived there to affect a change that was not surface level and was longer lasting?
Yeah, I remember the level of engagement, because a lot of the people that were there moved. Of course, they were, in a lot of ways, they were displaced. I mean, they had to move to other apartment buildings. So the people that I would be talking to were neighbors that had to stick around in the aftermath.
Yeah.
So they were telling me, here's what the future looks like for us. And if you go there today, it's a senior living facility, and it's very colorful. I remember meeting a neighbor. Her name was Jean Simmons. I know. She was from the Barbados, though. This is the Barbados Jean Simmons.
Where is he now?
Yeah, and she Jean Simmons, yeah. And she would be like, Will, I really like this design. It's so colorful. It's like I'm living in a box of Skittles.
Oh my God.
Which was awesome, because you're like, you don't want to design something where someone's going to go, something that looks like someone's going to a senior facility that looks like where you go to die.
Yeah.
And I know, having lived in that house for a little while before I moved to Detroit, there, senior living facility, there's ambulances there all the time. People fall.
Yeah.
So you're wondering to yourself, like, oh my God, did somebody just pass away in this box of Skittles? And, you're thinking about what Miss Jean Simmons said. But overall, the project has been impactful. There's solar panels on top. I think there's sort of a way to walk around a track, or to walk around the property. Water slow release water retention. So sort of leaning in on the sustainability side of things. But overall, I think as a young architect and designer in a neighborhood that wanted to make change, that was probably one of the more impactful projects of my career.
That's amazing. So our hair color is not the only thing that's changed since that time.
Brother, you already know.
But, there's this small matter of a global pandemic, which shook everything. But I think one of the most evident things that I see on a daily basis is empty corporate parks, half-empty high-rises, those kinds of things. So that the economic impact of that is really easy to see. I mean, it's very tangible. But what do you think the human impact of that is?
Well, for a city like Detroit, what I'm seeing, and I'll use two cities. I'll talk about Calgary, which has, I think, some ridiculous. If you look it up on Google, Calgary really has a problem. Meaning, their office spaces are not leasing. So we're talking about 80% vacancy, some ridiculous amount. So as a city, they're both were thriving pre-pandemic, and now find themselves in a very unusual predicament. Detroit also in the same way. So Detroit sort of pre-pandemic was well on its way, had Maurice Cox, who's now the head planner at the city of Chicago, but pre-pandemic Maurice was in Detroit and things were rocking.
Yeah.
Right? He was sort of setting a path forward for neighborhoods, for the city itself, and then this issue. What I think the difference between the two cities is this. Detroit has sort of leaned in on a different level of public space, a different level of public space design in a way where I felt like this summer I saw a lot of pop-up situations, takedown situations, expanding, contracting, like using the city almost as an experimental ground, knowing that you have visitors, you know, more than the retailers, right? That's a problem. But Detroit was like, well, how do we entertain, like we still have to entertain people who are coming into this city. So if we create all these very unique pop-up situations around public space, if we get our riverfront fixed up, then what we're creating is a city that is for these visitors, right? And so this is going to help us maybe solve this problem in the short term, which is how do you build maybe just excitement around the city, momentum, true publicness, you know, what people want to see in a city is that there's activity going on. So I feel like Detroit's done an awesome job. The riverfront has been voted #1 more than a few times in a year. And there's a new place called the Midway, which is like where you go to roller skate downtown. There's like basketball courts, there's concerts, small concerts. The other day they had it on TV, these sort of pods where you go and you sit into these pods, and I think it feeds music into, it's like a relaxation reset pod. And these are all in sort of the public landscape.
Give me one of those.
And I was like, oh man, I got to get downtown to go check this thing out, right? And that's different than the problem that maybe Calgary is trying to solve, which is, you know, all types of new downtown neighborhoods, new development, a lot of new housing, but too much office.
Yeah.
So the conversions, you know, their issue is converting massive amounts of office space into new residential units. And not only that, but now cities are like, okay, well, if we have, let's say we have 10,000 office spaces available, we can't make them all market rate. Like, you know, I had told students yesterday on the phone, I'm like, what type of city do you want to live in? You know, what is it? Is it a playground for the elite? Is it a playground where you know, only you have to pay to play sort of thing? Or is this a city for everybody? You know, what do you desire is what the question I was posing to them. And I said, you know, you have to be the change. You have to sort of be the type of architect that's going to invite people to a meeting, that's going to remonstrate on a development you don't believe in. I said, you know, if you're just going to sit behind a desk and push paper around, then you're not going to be part of the city that you want to see.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I said, I put the question back on them as they were asking me what I thought the futures of cities were going to look like. So I'm putting it back on you. What city do you desire? Then that's what we should go after. I spent the better part of my career showing up to those meetings, making change where you see an opportunity to make change, even if it meant taking a big risk, or maybe not working at a big office and doing a small project on your own just so that you can will it to be what you see the world to be and not maybe what your employer sees the world to be, or what an economic situation or a political situation, something that's driving your hand and your creativity to sort of create something that ultimately you don't believe in. I just feel like, you know, cities, man, are changing their living things.
Yeah.
Every city's taking a different tact. But I do see more affordable housing coming into downtown Detroit. I also predict that in order for Calgary to succeed, you're going to have more affordable and market rate together.
Yeah.
Cities cannot be playgrounds to the elite.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about here, and I'm trying to think about where we could go next. But what's freshest in my mind is we have an office that moved during the pandemic, and became smaller, and knew that it was. Everybody knows that the landscape is changing, the office scape is changing, but all we really had to go on as we were designing this new space during the pandemic is like conventional wisdom.
Sure.
We'd had consultancies who said this is what's going to be optimum for your workplace, and
Right.
so a lot of those insights have carried over. Well, now everything's turned upside down, and we're having to take a fresh look at like what that means. What are you seeing are the needs of people? Like, what are practical applications within a modern office space that you see are specifically addressing the human needs of people working in the office now?
I'm going to answer your question by talking about convention centers.
Okay. I like it.
Okay. I remember a long time ago, there was a place in Detroit called Cobo Hall. And Cobo was like a big, what was the place in Chicago called? There was also the big convention center.
Oh.
I forget the name. But Cobo was the one for Detroit.
Okay.
And the auto show would bring all these people into one building, right? That was sort of what was popular. And once upon a time, that sort of, fast forward 15, 20 years, everyone's like, no one's going to the auto show. And everyone's asking, what should we do?
Yeah.
No one's coming to the auto show. No one cares about cars. What's happening here? And the concept that rose to the top was, how do we use the city as a convention center? How do we decentralize this thing that we've come to understand as this, gathering space for publicness around automobiles? And how can people come to Detroit and go up the street 2 blocks and there's a car in an abandoned building? How do you go up the street to another space that is more interesting than the one before and put a Camaro? And so again, getting away from where this event might happen in this one location and breaking it out into an experience.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to talk about how people want to work. How do we remove ourselves from this decentralized sort of act,
Yeah.
which is about a lot of things. It's about power, it's about control, maybe it's about just something we're used to. It's also an economy. The city depends on a corporation bringing all these people so that people can buy lunch.
Yeah.
People can go buy their wife flowers at the store, whatever it might be. But today, none of that's happening.
Yeah.
And so this idea of a decentralized office might be what we need. And for our office, we have a 45-year-old lady who has a child and prefers to work at home at night.
Yeah.
My office is not serving her needs. So she came to me and said, hey, look, my best time is between 10 and 2:30, 3 in the morning. That's when I get my stuff done. All right, well, my office is not open at that time. It's dangerous for you to be there, and it's dangerous. She goes, well, I'm moving out of this space. Okay, no problem. Next week, I got some interns coming from Chihuahua, Mexico. They are now, so while she's exiting out of the space,
Yeah.
I got some new people going to come into the space for 3 months. So she's gone, they're there, and I feel like this is now what the space is really just a landing pad
Yeah.
for everyone's way of working.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think back to even the early days where, we're all in our own space, but we're still trying to maintain a culture and a sense of togetherness. And you try things. I don't think we're unique in this at all, but try things like happy hours, like virtual happy hours, and they didn't stick around. And the reason is that they just weren't effective. And there's no substitute for that sense of togetherness. So it seems to me that even when there is decentralization, a hub is nice to have, you know, like
Yeah.
a place for people to still get together and interact, even if it's not, you know, quote unquote productive, is an important aspect as well.
I'm trying to find value, honest, because you know, I've been in my own spaces and I've had employees, and I'm trying to like position the value of the water cooler conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the value there? You know, it's taken up 10 minutes of my time. It's with somebody that maybe I'm just exchanging some niceties with.
Yeah.
You know, is there value there or not in terms of building the culture of the office? Because ultimately what you want are people that are passionate about the work, not whether or not people know what I did last weekend or if they care about my kids and their birthday next week. I don't know that people generally care about those things. Maybe they do, but creating a culture to me is really about creating a culture behind the work.
Yeah.
And can people from far be passionate about a website you're designing or a building you're working on? And, you know, I guess whether you're at a coffee shop or you're in Mexico City, as long as people are caring about the work,
Yeah.
the space between that is maybe not as relevant anymore.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. So we've covered a little bit of ground, largely focused on the past and even the present. But I'm interested in what human needs are you looking to address going into the future? You mentioned with purpose, which I should mention is the consultancy and the company that you have. But what do you see are the big human issues that you are hoping to address with architecture, design, build, space planning, those kinds of things?
You know, I'm always curious about what happens to this idea of publicness, public space. One of the last sort of surviving institutions, of course, is the library. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've had more than a few opportunities to design, you know, what the future of libraries are. Are they spaces of inquiry? Are they where digital archiving happens? Is it, you know, playgrounds? You know, and I was in Calgary, and I went to a library there that almost had like a playground for kids, but all you saw were not single parents. They're there with their kids. Yeah. Books were not the focus. Play was the focus, and there happened to be some books after they're done. You could sit down and I thought, man, there was meetings. It was a different type of dynamic and a different type of public. Yeah. And I felt like, wow, this is awesome. So I'm excited about the future of libraries. Yeah. And so what that's going to be is always something that I'm curious about. And we could talk about that. The second thing that I'm interested in always is, you know, spaces, and this goes in line with the libraries, spaces of equity. You know, how do we build a more just city? Yeah. How do we build a more just affordable housing project? Yeah. You know, how can people realize an American dream, which is about owning a piece of the pie? Yeah. How does that happen through these new models of development, which is around community wealth building, asset-based development, community land trust, community interest trust, and community investment trust. So these are all, you know, what I'd call new forms of development ideology that I'm curious, you know, and not only curious, but I'm working in them. I'm working in those spaces to figure out how can things get more equitable. Yeah. And how do we create a more just city today? Yeah, I do want to jump back to the library thing, because I think that's incredible. There's a big equity note on that too, you know, because currently the library is a place of truly public access, and knowledge and education is so important. One thing, this is more out of my own curiosity, is
I've often wondered, as AI comes to bear and there's more and more digital implementation, and it becomes more and more prevalent in our culture. Do you think it's possible that there could be an equal and opposite reaction from that to analog, in the way that we're listening to music on vinyl now a lot? Right. That has become big business. Do you think that, and we're seeing even in the political climate a lot of discourse around books? Do you think it's possible that culturally we could go back to books?
Yeah, I think just almost like today there are special cursive classes.
Yeah.
Could you have imagined many years ago, like, cursive is just what we learned?
Yeah.
Now it's a special class, almost like calligraphy, where you
right.
have to, only the elite will know how to write. That, in a way, I feel like the movie Wall-E is a good indication that, in the future maybe we're only communicating through emojis and through text, nonverbal communication, and that those who have the ability and the finance to learn how to read will have books. Yeah. And that will be that'll be sort of a thing to have to overcome. I could never imagine that, but that's usually what happens in these situations. As a new technology emerges, you're going to have keepers of the culture.
Yeah.
People like you and I who want to continue to carry around crates.
Yeah.
And be conservators of that music on this piece of, on this physical platform.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's going to be a specialty sort of thing. I don't know where libraries sit on that, as more collections are digitized, as people sort of I think there's, even these days, if you don't return a book, I don't even think the libraries are like, well, we're not going after you. Yeah. If you felt like you needed it, then keep it.
I just noticed this week, my daughter is a pretty avid reader, and I renewed my library card basically for her, and she had checked out a book. It became overdue. I went to renew it, and there was no fee.
Yeah.
I was like,
I think they're trying to get rid of that and just encourage people to come.
Yeah.
And just be part of the library experience, and let's remove this barrier.
Yeah.
Which is the fee.
Yeah, that seems important to continue on.
Well, again, if it's a barrier towards a just, if what it takes to create a just city is that fee, then let us remove it. Yeah. And then people have access to books. And, I can't think that today people are just stealing books at an alarming rate. I doubt that that's happening.
Right.
And so the libraries are probably like, well, what are we losing? What do we got to stand to gain? Let's forget this. We're wasting more time going after people and the systems that we're in, rather than just, so that's the moment we're in.
And there's free libraries on every neighborhood corner.
Free
these
libraries.
Days,
and, every library to me is now, I'm thinking about the Carnegie libraries that are all over the United States.
Mm-hmm.
As each one is now becoming very specific space to meeting the needs of their local community. So like in Wilmington, Delaware, I was in Wilmington doing a public library, basically purchasing all their furniture, redoing all their interior furniture. And when I got to listening to them about what their needs are, and this was during the pandemic, so this was money that the libraries had received because of the pandemic, and now they're sort of doing a refresh to anticipate what's going to happen when people come back, right? So this is an exciting moment. You don't want to miss the mark. But it seemed to me like old big furniture, wood furniture, all that was out. Yeah. Flexible furniture, things that people can lift up. I can lift this up, and we can create a space over here and have something here for us. Yeah. It was that level. And then all the furniture couldn't have seams in it, because of bed bugs. So there's a different level of now publicness that the library is anticipating, which is how do we have a molded plastic type of furniture that doesn't have any seams so we can't get any bugs. Everyone can use it, easily cleanable, easily moved.
Yeah.
And this is the new library. So gone is the wood cubicle with you studying late into the night and the sort of institutional sort of, all that's gone in lieu of a more flexible, more bright, more energetic, more inviting library.
Yeah, maybe a thread that connects a lot of what we've talked about today is that it seems like a trend going forward, I mean, it seems flippant to call it a trend, but you know what I mean, is like specificity, like design. People, when I think of, placing ads and those kinds of things, I mean, we just know so much about people's behaviors because so much of our behaviors are being captured that reaching people is becoming a much, much more specific process. And you talking about the libraries that are addressing specific communities. I mean, that's all kind of exciting in that it seems like it's bringing a lot of design solutions and architectural solutions to a place of addressing particular people or particular areas and not quite so much like, cookie cutter solutions that are globalized.
That the Carnegie Library sort of offered us, which was here's just fluted columns, very so it had a very prescriptive. You knew a Carnegie Library when you saw it. You knew how it was set up.
Yeah.
Those days are now behind us. What was very clear was the librarian was like, look, on a daily basis, no one is sitting at any of these chairs. What we're seeing is when people come into the library, they're all tethered to the wall. Everybody needs juice, and everybody is really entering the world through their phone at the library. So you got information on your phone, and you got information at the library. No one's reading the books or at the tables. Everyone's on a wall, plugged in.
Yeah.
And so, the real question in here is the furniture all needed to be wired. Flexible, but it needed to either have a pad to charge or the floor needed to be like all juiced.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like it was actually an eye-opening sort of thing, and I'm glad that I went through it because it's sort of special microbial, non-touch platforms, new types of chairs, flexibility, information is way different, kiosks where you can swipe and sort of find your digital book.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's a Q, what is it, RFID, the little thing that you sort of, it knows.
Not on my depth there.
Yeah. It's sort of like, as you're walking around, you might have a tag and it's able to pick up who you are. RFID. Gotcha. I think it's an RFID tag. And, by virtue of you being at the library, it knows where you are. By virtue of you touching that screen, it will then download to your phone. And then now you're at the library, your book is your phone. It's that sort of seamless type of publicness that I think is pretty awesome to think about.
That does feel very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Wil, for not only being here,
thank you.
I'm a great admirer of your work, but even a bigger admirer of the good that you're doing. So
still
thank
doing
you so
that.
much.
Thank you so much. It's easy to I don't want to say go extinct, but not to be relevant. And it's a challenge all the time to stay in front of the work.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, happens through young people that I'm teaching. A lot of it is just being in public and people sharing how they see the future.
Yeah.
And so, I'm simply been given a gift to have a great set of ears and, a pen or a pencil that allows me to sort of see the future and translate that.
Yeah.
And I hope to have another 40 years doing that type of work.
Well, I think we can leave it here. Will, I'm such a huge admirer of your work and an even bigger admirer of the good that you do. So thank you. And thank you for tuning in. We're so glad that you were here and part of the conversation. We'll see you next time on ShoffChats.
Oh, there was something special.